Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a witch who slept for 1,000 years in the Forest of Thorns. One day, a handsome, blonde prince discovered her. He was very young, and the witch took him under her wing. But when he turned 15, she disappeared without a word. The witch went back to her slumber, and the prince wandered the forest for a long time to find her. After gaining immense power and authority, he cut through thorns and fought monsters. His goal was to reach the small castle where the witch slept. It had been a whole 10 years since the prince had last seen her. When he finally found her, he razed the forest and her house to the ground, then proposed. And they lived happily ever after the end. The female lead immediately realized this story was about her. The man beside her loved her deeply, even prepared to destroy everything. His name was Cedric von Dillion, the Emperor of Elysium, the very prince from the fairy tale. And Ariel, a child Louise Arundel, was the witch who raised him. The Emperor couldn't decide whether to ruin her or make her happy. Ariel wasn't even sure they could reach a happily ever after. Cedric had already thought of the ending, but he couldn't guarantee she'd like the process. The female lead, believing the process was also important, smacked him hard in the face with a pillow. The Emperor didn't understand why she was so annoyed with his plan. If she just waited a little longer, she could see it all with her own eyes. Ariel was shocked, wondering when things had started to go so wrong. She had been comfortably nestled in her monster-filled forest until Cedric showed up to wake her and take her away. Strangely, when the female lead stepped into the real world, the child had become the ruler of the nation. She felt as if 1,000 years had passed. The Emperor took her straight back to the imperial palace, giving her no time to adjust. Ariel's arrival threw the entire palace into chaos. When people learned she came from the Eastern Forest, they labeled her a country bumpkin and started whispering behind her back. The female lead began to hear all the malicious gossip about herself. She had only been there a short while and still knew nothing about how the world worked, and her questions probably made her seem even more foolish. Furthermore, Ariel didn't recognize modern writing and was basically illiterate. It was unfair because she was actually Princess Ashild, the greatest witch of the Arendelle Kingdom. One day, she saw two mages carrying artifacts salvaged from the monster-infested forest. The female lead immediately recognized them as things from her home. The mages accidentally opened one of the books and panicked when they saw notes written in an ancient language. The book looked very familiar, but Ariel couldn't quite place it. She suddenly remembered it was the diary she wrote when she was 15. The mages called the manuscript a major discovery, and when they saw a shield insignia, they were ecstatic with joy. They had found her written records. This whole mess started about 15 years ago. As she did every time, Ariel was sleeping peacefully in her cabin at the edge of the forest. She opened her drowsy eyes to see him, a blonde child standing before her. For a moment, she thought she saw an angel, but all doubts vanished when he asked if she was really alive. To verify, he prepared to slit her throat, dagger raised. Ariel quickly retorted that if he did that, no one would ever wake up. The future emperor blinked at her, as if he had other options. The eastern forest was crawling with thorn bushes and monster trees, and time flowed slower there than in the outside world. Its borders were completely impenetrable, and Ariel had been trapped in this lonely place for many years. Whenever the forest seal weakened, she would awaken with a mountain of things to do. She would check the magic circles and the sealed portals within the forest. Then she would relax and study magic, having to make progress as quickly as possible before her awakened state disappeared. But this time, as Ariel sat at her desk, someone started banging on her door. She pretended not to hear, and the young Cedric accidentally kicked the door open. He laughed like a child, happy that he had actually done it. That child ruined her peaceful life. He poked around the witch's house and knocked over several plates. Ariel was puzzled. Just who was this child? It had been a long time since anyone had been able to enter this forest. Cedric remembered his mother's warning, "Don't talk to strangers." She was furious, but figured threatening him with a knife wasn't a good idea. He quickly clarified that she had opened her eyes on her own. He knew the story. The sleeping beauty in the woods would only awaken after a prince's kiss. But even after that, she continued to sleep. Cedric figured the curse might not be lifted since she was a witch after all. Ariel was stunned. She kicked him out like a pro. The prince clarified that he had covered her nose and mouth while kissing her, but she still turned pale. He stopped. His mother had taught him not to kill. He'd initially intended to hit her with a rock, but then he remembered his mother's warning, no cracking skulls. So he tried stabbing her in the throat with a dagger, hoping to wake her up, but the witch woke up first. She clarified that stabbing someone in the throat would kill them. Cedric rushed to the window. She had hoped he would just go home. However, the child grabbed handfuls of magical energy, sensing a child's magic everywhere. Ariel froze. This was impossible. She grabbed his shoulders. How do you know about that witch and her magic? Centuries should have passed in the outside world. She should have been forgotten. Yet somehow, this child knew the magic of the forest belonged to her. The case led them to ancient ruins and magical artifacts. Cedric noticed a child's magic still lingered within a magic circle. Then, he jumped and ran toward the woods. The young prince could feel her power was stronger here than in the artifacts. The forest's magic surrounded the child as if welcoming a magic master. Suddenly, the child realized he had to leave. Ariel followed him. Soon, Cedric was standing in the center of a magic circle. He decided to bring some toys next time. He stomped his foot and disappeared in a blinding pillar of light. The protagonist stared, dumbfounded by what she had just witnessed. Only a magic master could use that magic circle. Realizing he was a genius, she almost decided to take him as her disciple. But she decided to let things be. He never stayed long anyway. She ordered a beast-like tree to stop the intruder. She lay down for a nap, but was startled awake by the loud crash of Cedric blasting the door to splinters. Ariel couldn't understand how he destroyed her defenses just like that. It turned out the monstrous tree had helped him. Ariel saw a broken branch on the ground and assumed the child had ripped it from some poor tree. But the truth was he had almost fallen while running, and the monstrous tree had caught him. Hearing this, Ariel was stunned again. The forest usually hated outsiders, yet it adored this child. Moreover, Ariel sensed immense magical power within him. Regardless, she now called the monstrous tree a traitor. Cedric was pulling on it playfully, but the witch quickly reminded them. This wasn't a playground. Suddenly, Ariel noticed something was off. She scrutinized the child. His neck and arms were covered in scars and cuts, as if someone had been constantly beating him. He wore fine clothes and looked healthy, so he must have come from a wealthy family. She remembered the child mentioning a magic circle in his garden, so his house must be large. The only people who could hurt him there were his family, parents, or close servants. Ariel decided not to pry further, lest she stir up trouble. For some reason, she just saw him as a little puppy who came to play, so even when she noticed new wounds and bruises on him, she didn't care anymore. But Ariel couldn't help herself. She would glance back at him from time to time. The worst part was Cedric noticed every single time. The protagonist thought he would soon forget about the forest and everything would go back to normal. But one day, the boy appeared covered in wounds, too severe to ignore. He and his mother lived in a palace, and everyone turned a blind eye to them. He was the son of a maid, a prince whose life was in constant danger, and no one dared approach him. Recently, he had met his stepbrother, Frederick Brian Van Dillium. He hadn't yet decided which part of the idiot Cedric he would hit today. Later, while bandaging his wounds, Ariel couldn't understand how anyone could do such a thing to a child like this. Then, the little prince suddenly remembered that his horse had been killed. Brian had angered him, so Cedric decided to kill his stepbrother until he remembered his mother's rule, no killing. To get revenge, the child set a trap for Brian the next time he rode his horse. As a result, the stepbrother tripped on a rope and fell off his horse. Because Brian was injured, the horse was ultimately put down. Cedric desperately wished his brother dead, but unfortunately, only the poor animal died. The protagonist was glad he at least cared about something. Brian was driving him crazy. The child even wanted to gouge his eyes out, but somehow his mother forbade that too. Ariel was shocked, unable to understand what was wrong with this child. He sincerely hoped that when he grew up, he would finally be able to carry out all his plans. The witch felt a little relieved because he at least listened to someone. His mother had painstakingly raised him, and one small mistake could brand him a villain. Historically, Ariel truly admired that woman and decided to find out how Cedric's mother was doing now. The protagonist froze in shock when she heard the reply that she had passed away. Her last request was that her son never kill. So, the young prince had to keep this promise. Ariel admired his mother for trying to correct his personality until the very end. And if she had lived a little longer, the child might have turned out much better. Ariel decided to ask what happened. Had no one stopped his brother from fighting? Cedric recalled Brian appearing on crutches, accusing him of killing the horse and breaking his leg. The child wanted to think things over, but his brother suddenly flew into a rage, swinging his crutch at his face. Then he began to beat him recklessly, shouting insults. The maids watched from behind the door. No one stopped Brian, because Cedric was only the illegitimate son of some useless servant, a prince in name only. A few minutes later, his brother stopped beating him, gasping for breath from exhaustion. He swore that the next time he saw him, he would kill him. Cedric smiled contemptuously, wiping the blood from his hand, and coldly asked, "Are you done?" Seeing that smug smile, Brian lunged at him, trying to strangle Cedric. From this incident, Ariel realized that he was bullied because of his mother's low birth. After his mother died, no one cared if he was beaten, nor did they care how lonely he was. She wondered if it was true that no one cared about him. Cedric remembered the servants giving him clothes, food, and basic necessities, and he really liked the candies Ariel secretly slipped him. Now she understood why the child stayed in the woods for so long and always came back to play. He could only smile like this when he came here. He suddenly felt much better and tore off the bandages from his face. Ariel was shocked that the medicine worked so quickly. On the other hand, Cedric wondered if this witch was really capable. Ariel quickly clarified that she wasn't a witch, and the child suddenly became curious about who she was. At that moment, she completely panicked, frozen in place. To be safe, Ariel decided to hide her true identity as a shelled and introduced herself as Ariel. Cedric introduced himself too, and she told him he could come over and play anytime. From that day on, he would come running back to play with the tree monsters. Moreover, new wounds and bruises constantly appeared on his body. Ariel believed that the child would lose interest when he grew up and never come back. She couldn't stop him from getting hurt, so she decided to make the wounds heal faster. Ariel hoped that no matter what injuries he suffered, he would never feel the pain. She believed she could take care of him under any circumstances without harming either of them. But one day, he appeared covered in blood, holding a bloody knife with a calm smile on his face. A series of questions flashed through her mind, but shock left her speechless. What made her even more horrified was that Cedric had no wounds on him, and the blood was definitely not his. The child said he went hunting for snacks, but Ariel, snapping out of her daze, questioned what trouble he had gotten into. When she heard that it was Brian's doing, she prayed that he had only been splashed with blood. It turned out that Brian was just showing off his new stallion. He rode up to him and taunted him, asking if he wanted to kill this horse too. The grooms rushed to explain that the behemoth hadn't been trained yet, and wandering around with it was practically suicide. Brian waved them to shut up and drove the muzzled horse toward Cedric. Then he flicked his whip, and the horse instantly reared up in fright. The huge hooves flew straight at the child's face, but a second later, the giant horse fell to the ground dead, blood gushing from its neck like a fountain. No one could figure out how it happened. Cedric exhaled calmly. That was too dangerous. He added, "Keep your pet on a leash next time." Brian, catching sight of the knife in his hand, wet his pants in fear and ran to his mother. After hearing the story, Ariel was bewildered. The young prince knew he had no choice. His life was at stake. Ariel knew that. Any other child in his situation would have just panicked. She felt he did the right thing this time. If his life was threatened, it was best to strike first. It was bath time. She sat him in the tub and scrubbed furiously, the blood clinging to his skin, refusing to wash off. Then she dressed him in clean clothes that Daniel used to wear. Ariel couldn't understand. Didn't anyone care that he was wandering around covered in blood? Cedric felt his servants were always too busy, so no one showed up. He recalled his mother's words. After her death, everyone who approached him would have ulterior motives. No one would do anything for him without a reason, so he had to be vigilant. Ariel understood, and she completely agreed. She, his mother, was probably worried about how he would face this cold and ruthless world alone. So, the only way for him to survive to adulthood was to become cold, suspicious, and start seeing everyone as a threat. But you simply couldn't imagine the isolation he was going through. Life would be much easier if his personality were simple and straightforward. But Cedric had a natural aura that made even the coldest people questioned themselves. Ariel decided to point out that he was ridiculously handsome. The boy was stunned. No one had ever described him that way, except for scary. Ariel knew that a boy with a knife was indeed scary, especially when he was covered in blood and grinning. Then he suddenly said, "Ariel, you're something else." But he wasn't referring to her looks. Cedric liked the multicolored glow around her. Of all the people he'd met, only Ariel possessed that luminous aura. Ariel was puzzled. The eye of magic. That was the mark of a born sorcerer. She grabbed him and ran outside to test it, drawing a magic circle in the dirt. He only needed to memorize the spell and connect the red dot with the green one. As soon as he did, a glowing pentagram appeared in the air. Suddenly, flames erupted from the center. Cedric, realizing he could control them, grinned and twisted the fire into various shapes. Ariel couldn't believe he'd completed a fairly high-level pentagram with just 2 points. The flames ignited a treant, which started howling with tears. The heroine immediately yelled at the boy to use water magic. It took Cedric 2 seconds to figure it out, and a huge tsunami flooded the area. Soaked to the bone, Ariel realized she was looking at a true genius. She decided their meeting was destined. After that, the heroine became greedy and made a decision she shouldn't have. On the one hand, she knew it would take a lot of time to correct the young hero's personality, but she yearned to nurture him into a powerful magician. Besides, what if all of this backfired on her? Just then, the boy decided to figure out what she was thinking. Ariel, gripping his shoulders tightly, decided to teach him magic. Cedric was completely stunned. The heroine decided that by then he would be strong enough to defeat Brian. The boy thought that if she wished it, he was willing to try. Ariel, thrilled, decided to hand him an advanced magic book. The next time, she took him to the library and energetically began gathering manuscripts. Cedric opened one and couldn't believe his eyes. Were those really letters? It turned out he had never seen such writing before. Ariel was stunned that the young lord of a grand manor hadn't even learned to read. She learned that he had a tutor until his mother died. The heroine realized this was his family's doing again. The best way to torture a child was to turn him into a useless fool. They didn't teach him, so that even as an adult, he would never have a chance to escape, she thought. Ariel vowed to work hard with him no matter what and make him an outstanding mage. She started by finding basic books to teach him the alphabet. It turned out Cedric already knew the modern alphabet, and the language she'd been trying to teach him was an ancient one. Meanwhile, the heroine dug out a picture-based magic book from her collection. She wondered what Daniel was thinking, collecting all that stuff in the lab. Hearing the name again, Cedric wondered who they were talking about. He couldn't believe there were actually other people in the magic forest. Ariel sighed heavily. There's no one else. Absolutely no one. He's been dead for a long time. Cedric changed the subject, amazed by the sheer number of books in her basement. The heroine decided to let him explore the rest on his own once they had the basics down. The first few days of lessons flew by, and the boy quickly grasped most of the fundamentals. The training could begin. Cedric didn't understand. Since he could see magic, wouldn't it be enough to just memorize the magic circles? Ariel quickly clarified that while the visual ability helped initially, he wouldn't gain deeper knowledge that way. The boy found it strange that she was so passionate about magic, but never used it. Later, he was about to leave when the heroine suddenly called out to him. She handed him a book of basic magic circles, saying he could read it in his own time. Cedric was stunned by the unexpected gift. Later, he looked up how to enhance fire magic. The notes in the book were written in the ancient language of Arendelle. Furthermore, the book mentioned a magical echo, which Ariel herself possessed. She lived alone in the magic forest, spoke the ancient language, knew magic inside and out, yet got along with monsters. The young prince found her fascinating. The more he learned, the more curious he became. One night, he fell asleep with the book in his hand. A while later, a servant slipped into his room. The next morning, Cedric woke up in the blinding sunlight and suddenly realized the book was gone. He rushed into the hallway, hoping to catch the servant who had been there last night. Rounding a corner, he found Brian holding the book, which the servant had just handed him. Cedric thought the servant had stolen it from someone, then caught Brian's furious glare and remembered how his horse had died. Brian panicked, fearing the same fate. He screamed and ran to his mother for help, while the servant who had snatched the book tried to slip away quietly. but Cedric barked at him, his gaze cold and unwavering. Just then, a knight appeared and asked what was going on. The knight immediately understood that something belonging to the royal family had been stolen. He sent word that the culprit's wages would be docked and he would be sent to hard labor. Then Cedric remembered the old law about thieves having their hands cut off. The servant paled. He wanted the thief punished immediately, right before his eyes. The knight hastened to clarify that it was an outdated law, but the young prince was ready to carry out the punishment himself. The servant broke down crying, begging for his life, and blamed Prince Brian for ordering him to steal the book. The soldier called him a fool and immediately carried out Cedric's order. Stealing wasn't enough. Now he was insulting royalty. The knight was stunned, but the young prince didn't flinch at the sight. Cedric just shrugged. He didn't care. The maids were terrified by his cold, unshakable composure. This child, always different, faced endless criticism and exclusion. For him, emotions were a foreign language, and right and wrong a blur. One day, a stray cat attached itself to Cedric, and he couldn't understand why it wouldn't leave him alone. His mother hastened to explain that the cat found him endearing, and this was its way of showing affection. Then Cedric started clinging to his mother, who reminded him that only cats did that. Later, Cedric thought cats were strange. Small, soft, and furry. His mother found them cute and taught him how to pet them. The child remembered that some flowers were also cute, so he decided to pet them too. His mother didn't mind, and he didn't understand the difference. As all this was happening, the lady wondered if her child would ever be all right. Later, they found the cat lying in a pool of its own blood, gazing at the mangled corpse. She assumed it must have been run over by a carriage. Just then, Cedric remembered, cats are cute, pet them. He reached out to touch the bloody head, but his mother jerked his hand back. She decided to give the little creature a proper burial, and decided to grieve later. Afterward, he placed a small flower on the kitten's grave. She watched closely, realizing he was starting to understand. She taught him not to kill or hurt anyone and to hide his power. Before she died, she made him understand how much she loved him. She truly hoped he would one day understand what it all meant. So his mother always wished for Cedric to find someone special to be by his side. But after her death, his whole world turned gray. People, everything seemed lifeless. He returned to the castle alone. No one cared. One day, the child wandered into an ancient magic circle in a corner of the garden. The moment he stepped onto it, Cedric suddenly felt a surge of a child's magic. In an instant, power coursed through him, and a magic circle lit up. The child, along with his magic, was sucked in, landing directly in the middle of a forest. He walked a short distance and, to his astonishment, found a house. Out of curiosity, he went inside and found her in the bedroom. Then he noticed something strange. In this gray world, only she and the magic surrounding her were in color. Ariel, asleep, was breathtakingly beautiful, radiant like an angel. He wondered what she would look like when she moved, so he sat down and waited for her to wake up. But hours passed, and she didn't move. Finally, he grabbed a large stone and threw it at her head, hoping to wake her up. But then he remembered his mother's words, "Don't throw stones at people." So he went home, deciding to wait another day. When he returned the next day, he couldn't believe it. She was still asleep. Suddenly, he heard a strange rustling sound. He turned and saw a treant. The child was confused. What did this monster want from him? There was a forest in the east, full of monsters where time stood still. Legend had it that it was unreachable, that no one had ever successfully entered. Then Cedric realized he was standing in that very forest. The air was thick with the sheld's magic, stronger than even the antiques in the castle. He poked the treant with a stick, hoping it would move. He needed to figure out who the girl in the house was. She couldn't be a witch, or her magic would be obvious. Then it hit Cedric. He remembered a fairy tale his mother used to read to him. In the story, the prince woke Sleeping Beauty with a kiss. Minutes later, he stood by her bed, a determined grin on his face. The boy leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. Because he was a prince, she should have woken up immediately, but she didn't react at all. So he decided to lightly prick her neck with his dagger, hoping the pain would startle her awake. He crouched over her chest, the blade against her throat, when suddenly her eyes snapped open. At that moment, he felt as if a rose-colored filter had been placed over his eyes. He saw the heroine's golden pupils spinning. making him dizzy. In reality, she was completely terrified and had no idea what was happening. That day, one person completely captured the young prince's attention. Now, Ariel heard the story of how his servant had betrayed him, siding with Brian and stealing the book. The heroine was furious when she heard this news, thinking she should have dealt with the fellow a long time ago. In any case, the book was a rare edition, with no other copy in the world. But Cedric wasn't about to let them off easily and vowed to protect the first gift he had received from Ariel. The heroine thought the servant was the only one to blame and heard that, as punishment, the boy had ordered his hand cut off. Ariel patted his head, thinking he did the right thing. Cedric was shocked by her reaction, as everyone else had been horrified. But Ariel believed that it was better to follow through than to back down and swallow one's pride. She praised the boy again, and then decided it was finally time to help him wash the blood off. Cedric was still confused. She used to be afraid of him, but now it seemed she was just being cautious. Washing off the blood was no problem, but the smell was another matter entirely. While Ariel searched for a special soap, the boy's resolve to possess her grew stronger. He loved this forest with all his might. Here, no one could take the heroine away from him. When the prince was bored to death, she practically gave him an excuse to chase her. The stolen book had fallen into the hands of mages, who were completely shocked by its contents. They discovered the book belonged to Cedric and speculated that he might have stumbled into some ruins. Ansel, the second son of Viscount Price, a royal attendant and special operations intelligence officer, also heard about this. He knew this wouldn't blow over easily, so he went directly to his mistress with the report. He personally examined the book and confirmed it came from a magical kingdom. This kingdom was thousands of years old. The book's owner was Cedric, and Ansel wondered what to do. The woman in the chair told him to use his own judgment and begin secretly following the prince. Soon after, two mages also decided to monitor the prince. Cedric had noticed them from the beginning, but remained silent. When the mages let their guard down, he suddenly appeared before them. They immediately fled at full speed. The young prince couldn't understand. Did they really like the book Ariel gave him that much? Regardless, they needed to be more careful when entering the forest. As he approached the magic circle, he felt watched again, but when he turned in that direction, there was no one there. Afterward, Ansel calmly watched the young prince disappear into a pillar of light. Because of the mage's carelessness, Cedric had become more cautious, so Ansel was almost discovered. After the prince disappeared, he crouched by the magic circle and sensed Esheld's magic. Meanwhile, the boy apologized to the heroine for being gone so long. He'd been followed by some strange people. For Ariel, only a few days had passed. She remembered that time flowed differently in the forest. The young hero was annoyed by the surveillance. After all, if they had just followed discreetly, it wouldn't have been so obvious. The heroine was also wary of this detail, because if they learned the truth about Cedric in this forest, it would cause trouble. So, she decided to teach him how to erase magical traces and avoid being tracked. The boy was stunned. Such a thing was actually possible. The wind could mask noise, and the power of the earth could erase footprints. The moment she demonstrated the magic circle, Cedric memorized it and succeeded on his first try. He hid behind a tree, and the treant lost track of him. Cedric was ecstatic. He felt he could now move through anywhere like a ghost. Ariel tossed him a book to study on the days he couldn't come. After that, wandering through the woods with her young hero became her favorite new pastime. One winter night, they conjured music with magic and danced the night away. They filled the room with oranges and ate until they couldn't eat anymore. That night, they simply sat leisurely and watched the snowflakes fall. When spring arrived, they brewed magical berries and feasted. Years passed in this wild and carefree rhythm. One evening, Ariel found the treant lingering by the magic circle, waiting for Cedric. She knew she had to stop it from becoming too attached to the fellow from another world. They were supposed to spend hundreds, even thousands, of years here, but Cedric rarely stayed long. But this child was like a ray of sunshine, illuminating the lonely forest that had stood for 1,000 years. Ariel wished she could spend every second with him. Later, 15-year-old Cedric found a shirt in the closet, praying she would let him stay. For Ariel, time flew by like lightning. But in the real world, time flowed normally. The shirt used to be very loose on him, but now it fit almost perfectly. Suddenly, Cedric realized his height had caught up with hers. Of course, he needed to stand on tiptoe to be level with her, but Cedric was sure that it wouldn't be long before he surpassed her. At that moment, Ariel realized that if he had been in the forest all this time, his height should have been far behind that of his peers. But he had grown taller and now looked his age. The slow passage of time in the forest had no effect on him. That night, Ariel returned to the magic circle, where she stayed for hours, trying to figure out why, until the Tran appeared. Time in the forest should move slowly for everyone, but Cedric is unaffected. This means his power is far greater than the power shield used to seal the forest. He's still too young to fully utilize his power, but it's only a matter of time. When that day comes, the forest seal will be swallowed by his magic, and the gateway to the other world will be blasted open once more. Then, the horrors of that ancient war will descend upon this world again. She couldn't let that happen, so Ariel began to plan her next move. The next day, the young prince was shocked to discover his magic circle had failed. He forced some magic into it, but something was blocking it. The magic circle was intact, so the problem must have been on the other side. Cedric started frantically pounding the ground, calling out Ariel's name, his face etched with confusion. There wasn't enough magic to completely shut it down, so she had only blocked the entrance. Cedric's desperate screams pierced through the seal, and she heard them clearly. She told herself that everything would be all right. After all, this day would come sooner or later. With Cedric gone for good, the house felt deathly silent. 1,000 years passed in a heartbeat. She wanted to erase this memory. First, Ariel put away all the books on the table. While tidying up, she saw his clothes carelessly thrown on the floor. She suddenly spotted a strand of Cedric's hair on the floor. She decided to do a thorough cleaning, erasing all traces of him. Cedric would soon forget all of this, she thought. After all, there were countless things in the world to distract him. Without warning, Ariel felt a wave of drowsiness wash over her, and she fell into a deep sleep. While she slept, the house cleaned itself, and the hair quickly disappeared. Ariel didn't know how long she would sleep, but she prayed that by then Cedric would have moved on. Meanwhile, Cedric was huddled on the magic circle in the rain, whispering her name like a prayer. A few days later, the maids whispered that Lord Cedric had gone mad. Cedric hadn't left the garden, staying by the magic circle the entire time. Without eating or drinking, without sleeping, Cedric pounded his fists on the ground, screaming her name like a madman. He looked worse than before, and people avoided him, even filled with fear. Cedric didn't know what to do to see Ariel again. Just then, with a bang, he bumped into a tall man who immediately apologized in a low voice. Ansel hoped the young master was still in his right mind. Cedric glared at him fiercely and snapped, "Get lost." Ansel narrowed his eyes at the prince, noticing his deteriorating condition. He decided to try a different approach, to get close to him. After that, Cedric began searching for any information about the magic forest, but found nothing, and without the magic circle, he couldn't enter. He saw a pile of books Ariel had given him during their last meeting, pushed to the side. Cedric didn't understand why she had given him so many books at once. He could have taken them one by one. He had thought it was homework she had assigned, wanted to get it out of the way since she would be busy soon. Now he realized that she had known he wouldn't see her again. From that moment on, he made it his goal to find a way into that forest. After countless sleepless nights and hundreds of books, he still found nothing. The maids lingered outside the door, waiting until Cedric fell asleep at his desk before slipping in to clean. They tiptoed in and began to gather the scattered books. Cedric grabbed one of the maids' arms, furious that they had touched his things without permission. He was enraged, vowing to chop off their hands next time, and then drove the maids out of the study. They knew the butler would be furious if the room wasn't spotless. But the threat of losing their hands was real. Similar things had happened before. Meanwhile, Cedric clutched Ariel's books to his chest, the last thing she had left him. Cedric couldn't understand why she had betrayed him and left. At first, all he wanted was to hunt her down and finish her. But then he changed his mind. He decided to trap Ariel in a dark room where no one but him could enter. For now, though, the goal was to find that forest. But without power or money, getting there was nearly impossible. Cedric arrived at the magic circle, only to run into Ansel. The information broker asked with a sardonic smile, "Your Highness, are you here to go to the Eastern Forest?" He also revealed that he had been tracking the prince's every move. Ansel also knew the magic circle's power was blocked, but he still asked, "Want to go to the other side?" Cedric was confused. Was this really about sneaking into the forest without using the magic circle? The information broker knew monsters guarded the place, so he thought, why not just send in a squad of knights? Cedric thought it was a joke. How could he possibly manage that? Ansel gave him a meaningful look and said with a smile, "You need to become the emperor." After the heir's sudden death, the power was divided among the 3 surviving children. The second prince had the full support of the knights, making him the best candidate for the throne. The third prince had the support of the church because his mother was of noble blood. Brian, the 4th child, had the backing of his mother's family, who were from the top nobility. So when Cedric heard the information broker's words now, he scoffed. The 5th son of a lowly maid. He thought such power plays were impossible. Ansel hastened to remind his highness that ancient magic still existed, and only he could use it. The empire ran on science and technology, followed by magic and engineering. At least other powers existed, but the royal family completely ignored them. The information broker planned to give that untamed power to Cedric. In exchange, he wanted to enter the Eastern Forest with his highness himself. Within that forest lay truths people had sought for centuries, secrets of a war that almost destroyed the world, and the power that stopped it. They wanted to step in and unearth the lost truths. Cedric blinked in confusion. "Who are you talking about?" Ansel quickly clarified, "I'm a level 2 field agent of the Truth Seeker Special Forces." Of course, this organization would become the future Emperor's power, as long as Cedric agreed to join them. Ansel was determined to make sure his highness would never regret it and would support him to the very end, no matter the cost. With the prince's magic, they quickly gained the support of mages and engineers. Over time, they won the loyalty of the knights and defeated their enemies. 10 years after the breaking of the magic circle, Cedric became the emperor, ready to enter the forest. Sometime later, Ariel woke up from her sleep, unaware of how long she had been out. Stepping out of her bedroom, she saw that everything was spotless. She then checked the magic circle and saw the seal was intact, meaning it was still deactivated. She turned to the treant, hoping it was protecting the forest well. During her slumber, all the emotions had subsided, and now everything was perfect. Earlier, she had heard Cedric's desperate cries from the magic circle, but now there was silence. Ariel hoped he had moved on from his family and found his own power. Regardless, she was glad things had returned to their initial peaceful bliss. Suddenly, Ariel noticed a strange shadow beneath her feet. She looked up at the sky and was shocked to see dozens of meteorites hurtling towards the ground. Seconds later, Ariel was thrown aside by a shockwave, and the forest was ablaze. In the distance, she spotted the figure of a walking mage, radiating incredible power. Ariel was confused, unsure of who he was or what he wanted. Knowing nothing of his motives, she decided to stall for time. Just then, the attacker summoned a storm, and a massive bolt of lightning struck the ground beside Ariel. Ariel collapsed, unconscious for a few seconds. As she slowly regained consciousness, all she could think about was getting out of there. The mage stepped forward, revealing a smirk, and asked if she was all right. Ariel didn't recognize him and had no idea why he was attacking the forest. But someone with that confident and smug demeanor probably thought he could boss anyone around. Ariel remained wary, unsure of what he was up to. Just then, Cedric suddenly made her a proposition. Ariel was dumbfounded. This guy bombarded her with meteorites, caused a storm, and now he was suddenly making her a proposition. She thought he was a madman who wanted to start a war. Besides, how did he even know her name? Looking at the man's face, she felt like they had met before. Then it hit her. Cedric. This mage looked exactly like him. Cedric sat down beside her, finally realizing how much he had missed her over the past 10 years. Ariel was speechless, staring at him with wide eyes. Cedric, in his eagerness to see her, had even burned down the entire forest on a whim. He considered a wedding gift for her. Ariel was confused. Did he really intend to give her this mountain of ashes as a present? Cedric suddenly wanted to check the magic circle. The next second, he grabbed Ariel and lifted her into the air. Ariel, shocked, ordered him to put her down immediately. It turned out this was what he had wanted to do ever since their reunion 10 years ago. Now his wish had finally come true. After putting her back on the ground, Cedric insisted they go to the magic circle together. Ariel noticed he had grown much taller over the years. She was also surprised that he still remembered her in this forest. Afterward, Cedric found the seal on the magic circle and quickly repaired it. He believed it was time to take Ariel away. After all, he had come here and found her. Ariel's feelings didn't matter at all. Glancing back, she realized the Trent's roots were still intact. They would return. Also, this was the first time she had left the forest since the war. She wasn't sure if the forest magic seal could hold. Meanwhile, the Emperor gave the order to return. Ariel froze when the commanding officer addressed him by his title. But just then, the magic circle activated, teleporting them directly to the Imperial Garden. Ariel saw 2 rows of servants respectfully waiting to greet their master. Ansel had a premonition they would return today and had everyone prepared. He only hoped the Emperor's trip had gone smoothly, but Cedric ignored him and walked straight towards the palace. He also noticed that everything had been arranged exactly as he had instructed. Ariel asked sharply, "You really became the Emperor?" Cedric quickly clarified that he did it to enter that magic forest. But Ariel was still confused. He had been a prince of ordinary birth. Everyone in his family looked down on Cedric. He felt it was a long story and decided to explain later. Besides, they had plenty of time now. The Emperor led Ariel towards his palace, where she would spend a long time with him. Ariel was completely overwhelmed, her mind blank. Cedric explained that he became Emperor for her, as there was no other way to enter the forest. He also planned to make Ariel his Empress. Upon hearing this, the girl and everyone around her were shocked. Cedric believed she had nowhere else to go. The forest was burned down, and her family was about to fall apart. Afterward, he took Ariel to her new room. He had designed it himself, hoping Ariel would like it. After pushing her inside, Cedric wished her a good rest. Ariel wanted to say something, but the door slammed shut in front of her. She stiffened even more when she heard the click of the lock from the other side. She didn't understand why the entire room was bathed in a deep red hue. Every piece of furniture was red. Good heavens, even the wallpaper and carpet were. The bed canopy looked like it would drip blood at any moment. Ariel was puzzled. Was he trying to take revenge on her for abandoning him 10 years ago in this way? Moreover, her clothes were still dirty from the earlier chaos, and even cleaning spells hadn't worked. She collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind a mess. How had things come to this? She knew Cedric was a prince back then and understood why he hid his identity. But they had a good relationship at that time, studying magic together and having fun. After all that kindness, was he really going to repay her with revenge? Ariel worried her head would explode. Those nightmares might return. When she closed her eyes, she found herself on the battlefield. Until the very end, she believed those people were still alive. The desperate screams of the dead echoed behind her, blaming everything on the princess. Ariel lost her voice, paralyzed by shock and fear. To the side, she spotted a body lying on the ground. Her face paled, eyes widening in disbelief. When she recognized him, holding Daniel's cold body, she couldn't help but tremble and sob. She panicked, not knowing what to do. After realizing she had lost everything, Ariel abruptly opened her eyes. Tears instantly streamed down her cheeks. She knew it was just a dream. Just then, Cedric appeared beside her and asked, "Who is Daniel?" She swayed, about to faint, but the Emperor caught her. He noted she was all right, but that didn't stop him from asking again. "Who is Daniel?" She tried to push him away, but her foot caught, and she fell backward on her back in front of him. An awkward tension filled the air, and Ariel's face flushed crimson. To her surprise, Cedric gently picked her up and placed her softly on the edge of the bed. He crouched beside her, gazing at her face, thinking, just how many secrets are you hiding? He believed that one day she would confess everything. He also realized that dreams like that would ruin anyone's sleep. She didn't understand how she was supposed to sleep in an asylum. Cedric might be taking revenge on her, trying to drive her insane. Why else would he go to such lengths to redecorate her room like this? It turned out he just wanted to surprise Ariel. He remembered red was her favorite color and wanted to give her a space she would like. The heroine recalled how they used to walk in a clearing filled with red wildflowers. The prince had decided that red must be her favorite color when he saw Ariel in that red dress. Ariel smiled and nodded, fully agreeing with his thoughts, but recalling that conversation, she couldn't understand how such a small thing could be the cause. She sat up abruptly, certain that Cedric didn't know what was going on. Meanwhile, Anselm was eavesdropping in the hallway, coming to the same conclusion, the same feeling. In any case, the Red Room wasn't an attack, but a sincere gift. Thinking about it this way, the room didn't seem so bad. Despite this, the heroine still requested that the room be restored to its original state. Cedric didn't understand her style, but Ariel didn't mind. He agreed to modify it bit by bit, and Ariel suggested starting with the door lock. Cedric ruffled her hair, muttering something about the lock being for safety, and then took her to the dining hall. Before that, he ordered 2 maids to show her around and help her freshen up. Ariel suddenly realized she could have told them to take her back to the forest instead of changing rooms. The Emperor was pleased to see that she was still so easily fooled, as long as her attention was diverted. Later, the maids were waiting for the new Empress. At the bathroom door, one of the maids was furious. The woman didn't even understand basic etiquette. Her colleague reminded herself that this was His Majesty's guest. The fact that she was about to become Empress made the maid even angrier. Thinking of Princess Rosemary and Lady Violetta, how could a nobody become the ruler? The other maid decided to remain silent to avoid trouble. If they wanted to keep their jobs in the palace, they had to be careful what they said. She decided to deliver the guests clothes herself and told the grumpy maid to control her expression. The grumpy maid was angered by her colleague's reply and after a while called her a coward. The room was changed to a decent color. The heroine washed up and ate, and now her brain was working again. To return to the forest, she needed a magic circle. She could try to find other ways, but could she escape this castle? The Emperor would definitely keep a close watch on her and wouldn't let her go easily. Besides, Ariel just couldn't get used to him. Her cute little Cedric had grown into a tall, serious man. Cedric thought she just liked children, and when he grew up, he was no longer useful to her, so she abandoned him. But the root of the whole problem lay entirely in his magic. Ariel didn't know how to explain, and Cedric blamed himself for getting older. The heroine was confused, not understanding how the conversation had turned in this direction so quickly. She concluded that he was just putting on an act, trying to gain sympathy. However, Cedric was so endearing, you couldn't bear to let him stay down. But Ariel didn't know how to wipe away his tears. Just then, Cedric had an idea and suddenly became very serious. He thought, since that's the case, why not just get rid of all the children? If everyone younger than him disappeared, Ariel's attention wouldn't be diverted anymore. The heroine turned pale with fright and began to beg him to spare the children. Just then, the Emperor suddenly pulled her close. He felt that was enough for today. He longed to spend the night with Ariel, but he held back for the time being. He slipped out of the room, leaving the girl bewildered. He pressed his hand against the door, triggering the magical seal that locked it. Cedric smiled smugly, pleased that the heroine hadn't noticed the magical trap on the door. She had no magical talent, but she was sensitive to magic. The Emperor made sure Ariel had no chance of escape. She shouldn't even think about it. Meanwhile, she decided Cedric was still that little brat. The heroine, still in the dark, felt uneasy. 10 years ago, when a magic circle closed, Cedric made it his mission to never let her leave. He became Emperor just to lock her in a gilded cage called the Imperial Palace. He never wanted to let her go again. If he had to die, he would die here. Meanwhile, the mages discovered a strange and eerie seal in the magic forest. They realized that the caster's level far surpassed theirs. They didn't hesitate to report it to the Emperor immediately. Soon after, Cedric learned about it from Ansel's report. The informant called off the investigation. No mage could break the great Eskilda's seal, but this thing looked very strange, as if something was trying to crawl out of it. That evening, the palace minister, disgruntled with the Emperor's choice, tossed some makeshift clothes at Ariel and left her to manage her new room until a suitable maid could be found. Moreover, the woman handed Ariel a list of permitted locations she could visit and then rushed out the door. The protagonist glanced at the list, realizing Cedric was trying to confine her. To distract herself from pacing, she had no choice but to read it. She opened the booklet and froze, completely baffled by the strange script. While she was trapped in a time-frozen forest, the world had continued to develop, resulting in a new writing system. That's why Cedric couldn't read the ancient text back then. then. Ariel suddenly realized that she, an all-knowing and powerful witch, was illiterate. This humiliating fact was unacceptable. She stormed into the hallway. The palace minister plastered on a fake smile and asked, "Is something the matter?" At that moment, the protagonist realized she didn't know how to explain the problem. First, she had to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. Suddenly, she noticed an ancient inscription on the wall, right next to a maid. As she approached for a closer look, she was immediately reprimanded and told not to touch it. The maid was furious that she would dare reach for such a priceless artifact without knowing anything about it. Ariel was stunned. Was it really that valuable? The maid explained that it was a painting by the Great Witch, a shield from the ancient kingdom of Arendelle. She considered the item priceless and wouldn't let the protagonist ruin a national treasure with her touch. Ariel was completely at a loss for how to respond. It was just something Ashel had doodled during a boring magic lesson. Sensing the new awkward atmosphere, Ariel panicked. But then she heard the maid's voice, scolding her for being an ignorant country bumpkin with no manners. Ariel stared at her, bewildered. Where was all this hostility coming from? She decided to ask if she seemed so naive that a mere maid would dare reprimand her over such a trivial matter. The maid grew even angrier, insisting it wasn't trivial at all, but a palace treasure. Just then, as she looked at Ariel, the maid suddenly fell silent. The protagonist decided to clarify. Was it palace protocol to humiliate the emperor's guest? The maid flinched, completely taken aback. Where had this sudden tension come from? Her eyes held the pride and superiority of a noble. But how could a simple country girl possess such a noble and dignified gaze? Ariel wondered what this maid had done to deserve standing here. At that moment, the maid realized her mistake and fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness. The protagonist placed her hand on the maid's head, calling her a complete snob. Was this palace so grand that even the staff dared to disregard the emperor's guest? Ariel thought that if this was how they treated her, she couldn't imagine how they treated Cedric in the past. No one cared when Brian hit him, but now they even ignored him for his lack of power. The protagonist thought that now that he was emperor, everything should have changed. With his personality, could he possibly overlook such treatment? But knowing his nature, he probably hadn't even noticed. Just then, Cedric rushed out, demanding to know what was happening. Seeing Ariel out in just her nightgown, he immediately draped his cloak around her. The protagonist decided that wasn't important right now. Teaching these maids basic manners came first. These girls showed no respect for his majesty. Even if he didn't care, the emperor's authority would crumble if the servants didn't show proper respect. Even if they thought he was a powerless prince, basic respect was essential. What if more people started ignoring his majesty? Cedric glared at the servants, his mind racing. Did they really think he was a powerless prince? At that moment, the maid and the other servants paled. Then he grinned, playing the part of a helpless weakling, a fake tear welling in his eye, praying Ariel would save him. The protagonist suddenly thought he looked like a pitiful puppy. Ansel and the Knight Commander silently pleaded with her not to fall for it. But Ariel thumped her chest with her fist, vowing to support him. Cedric beamed and leaned closer, curious why she jumped to his defense so quickly. The protagonist's mind went blank. She couldn't read. Panic set in. She remembered Cedric struggling with the ancient script until she taught him. She handed him the book, admitting she couldn't understand the words. To her surprise, the emperor seemed genuinely pleased by her illiteracy. Before, he would have moved heaven and earth to teach her anything she wanted to learn. But now, Ariel had just abandoned him. Unconditionally, the protagonist was speechless. The emperor smiled again, wishing her well in her studies. If she knew nothing, then she had no choice but to trust him. He told Ariel to go back to her room and rest. Then, he turned thoughtfully to the others. Ariel had completely misunderstood, but Cedric found it strangely amusing, and she was worried about his status. Ansel thought they should explain the situation to her, but the emperor felt it was unnecessary. She didn't seem like the naive type. Her aura was like that of someone who could command legions, the kind of authority that only someone who had reached the summit could naturally exude. Cedric hadn't thought much of it when he was younger, but as time went on, he began to sense that Ariel was hiding many secrets. When he turned to the maid, he couldn't believe it. Was she the one who had belittled him? The maid, realizing she had been disrespectful to his guest, burst into tears. He coldly reminded her that he had brought this girl to the palace as his future empress. The maid confessed her transgression, and he decreed that she must die. The Knights of the Knight's Order seized her. As she was dragged away, She couldn't believe what was happening. Cedric ordered a new round of training for all the servants, teaching them how to behave in Ariel's presence. In an instant, the whole empire was abuzz with gossip, saying that His Majesty had brought a dirty country girl into the palace. When the nobles discovered that she couldn't even read, they called it preposterous. No one could understand how this beggar had managed to seduce the emperor himself. Soon after, the designer Lurier arrived at Ariel's door with her assistants. They wanted to create the most beautiful clothes for the future empress and began taking her measurements. Ariel couldn't believe such a fuss was being made from so early in the morning. Cedric quickly added that if she was going to stay, she needed to dress appropriately. Ariel thought, well, if that's the case, she could wear some ready-made dresses. Meanwhile, the designer's assistants stared at Ariel, whispering behind her back. Lurier, having finished taking her measurements, tossed her a catalog and told her to choose a design. The first thing Ariel noticed was that modern styles were vastly different from the things of the past. At that moment, the women were in the process of selecting a suitable color. Then the emperor chimed in, declaring that she was very fond of red and hydrangeas. Ariel was horrified. She definitely didn't want that crimson dress with the red hydrangeas. When she realized it was his scheme, she couldn't believe he was going to have some gaudy garbage sewn. Annoyed, Ariel told him to let the professionals handle it. Everyone was stunned by how smoothly she silenced His Majesty. It was like training a dog. Pure dominance. The women were bewildered. Was Ariel truly his master? This triggered the second wave of palace rumors. The emperor had gone feral, chained up like a mad dog. When she heard this, Ariel was sure she was going insane. The only way out was to desperately escape as soon as possible. But the problem was, she couldn't read a single word and was penniless. So, as a matter of urgency, she had to get permission to inspect the palaces. Magic circle. Without magic, she couldn't use it at all, but hey, she was just curious what the magic circle outside the forest looked like. Cedric readily agreed. He had something to show her as well. Ariel was completely confused at first, but when she understood what was happening, she was utterly stunned. She didn't know why the palace had turned into a magical forest. Having not seen his mistress in so long, the Treant rushed towards her with open arms. He also immediately recognized the hero, equally delighted to see him. During the forest raid, the Treant had accidentally attacked Cedric. Now he was overjoyed that they were both safe and sound. The emperor blessed the beast with his magic and commanded it to guard the forest along with the teleportation circle. Watching the Treant grin, Ariel just couldn't understand what was so great about the guy who caused destruction with a meteor shower. Cedric carefully skirted around the core issue, giving things time to heal. The location that could be teleported to the forest through the magic circle used to be in the south of Arendelle. It was supposed to be immobile, so Ariel couldn't figure out why the magic circle was here now. It turned out to be an ancient relic they had dug up on the farm. An ancient emperor, a magic fanatic, had built a new palace directly on the site of the magic circle. Unfortunately, no one knew how to use it, so they abandoned it. Cedric stumbled upon the magic circle and teleported to the forest. In that forest, time barely flowed. 1,000 years had passed here, yet it was surprisingly intact. Ariel suddenly realized she'd used the wrong preservation magic on the seal. It was the magic of another legendary mage, a cleaner, the one who shared a laboratory with them in the forest cabin. The spell was so powerful that even after 1,000 years, the magic circle remained flawless. As a child, Cedric never understood, but as time went on, he realized that the forest was truly eerie. Living in that house was wonderful. It was always clean, and there was always food on the table. Plus, there was Ariel. Despite the many years that had passed, she hadn't aged a day, looking exactly the same as when they first met. It was as if time had forgotten her. The heroine pretended to be oblivious. That time-frozen forest, steeped in a magic of the legendary, which, a shelled. Ariel lived there, and she knew magic theory like the back of her hand, but possessed no practical magic. Cedric even thought she was a shelled at one point, and from then on, he began to delve into every clue about the Great Witch. It was then that he stumbled upon the name of the legendary mage, Akner. The mage possessed a vast number of relics, and the hero learned to discern his magic. Later, deep within a Sheld's magic-infused forest, he suddenly sensed Akner's power, but the person who had been living in the forest with Ariel was Daniel. At the time, the heroine couldn't believe he had guessed that the person was the legendary mage. But the emperor was troubled because, in his research, he had heard of a romantic relationship between a Sheld and Akner. Ariel thought he was crazy. It wasn't like that at all. She was shocked. Where did these absurd rumors come from? Impossible. Daniel was her older brother. Meanwhile, Violetta was praying at the altar. Suddenly, she heard the voice of the oracle echoing through the hall. The oracle revealed that a dark energy was shrouding the imperial palace. Later, the temple attendants were gossiping about Tamir, the country girl who was about to become empress, when they saw Lady Violetta standing there and immediately apologized. Lady Kelton, the only one who could hear the voice of God and the first candidate for empress, was shocked that the emperor had chosen someone else as his beloved. She recalled the recent oracle and realized something was wrong in the palace. Daniel Ackner Lauderdale Arundel was the prince and a powerful mage, 2 years older than the heroine. They always sparred with magic, but as soon as they started fighting, Crown Princess Serena Sheila Elizabeth Arundel would appear. Their older sister would stop their fights and scold them. Admittedly, they all had their quirks, but overall, they were a normal family. Now, Cedric wondered what their connection was to Ackner and the Sheld. Ariel pretended not to know, telling him to check his own records. But she knew he might have already pieced things together. This was bad news for the heroine. She had absolutely no interest in revealing her true identity. She had lived for centuries and didn't want to become a 1,000-year-old hag. It wasn't a big problem, but it was a delicate one. It was time to escape the palace as soon as possible. The best way was to return to the forest, but the emperor wouldn't let her just walk away. Regardless, she decided to take a chance and talk to him. As soon as Ariel opened the door, His Majesty suddenly appeared before her. She quickly expressed her desire to return to the forest and agreed not to disrupt the magic circle. Cedric thought for a moment and said that was impossible. There was no home there anymore. Ariel didn't think it was a problem. If everything was destroyed, she could just cast a restoration spell. The Emperor clarified, "No, I didn't just destroy the house. I erased it from this planet, molecule by molecule. And while I was at it, I took your things." The mages were going crazy. It was the first time they had seen so many ancient magic books. Just then, she realized the attendants hurrying around the palace were carrying her belongings. Realizing the gravity of the disaster, she rushed to the balcony. Staring at the servants carrying her things, she noticed something strange. One of them dropped a book. Ariel caught it. She froze. It was her own diary. Her heart nearly stopped. Then she overheard the mages going crazy over the contents of the book. One of them mentioned that it contained not only Sheld's name, but also Ackner's. The mages were thrilled. It wasn't just a diary. It was a treasure trove of research from 2 legendary mages. Only she herself chuckled wryly, recalling that it was just her teenage scribbles. She gave Cedric a sly smile, hoping he would help her retrieve those pages. The mages, noticing Ackner's name appearing repeatedly, assumed Sheld must have loved him very much. But it was just a bunch of teenage, angst-ridden complaints Ariel had written at 15, ranting about her brother. The Emperor felt it didn't make sense. Why did the heroine need this? What was the connection between the 2 mages? Ariel suddenly burst out, "I am a Sheld." Her voice was filled with anger. She thought Cedric had known all along, but it turned out he was only guessing. Cedric wanted to hear the truth from her own lips. Now that the truth was out, Ariel demanded her things back immediately. The Emperor glanced at the mages, realizing they wouldn't surrender this treasure easily without a fight. The female protagonist couldn't believe his weakness, that he couldn't even control them. Cedric sneered and ordered Ansel to bring everything up immediately. If the mages protested, they would confiscate more items from a forest and lock them in the Imperial Palace's warehouse. The informant decided to leave at least 1 notebook in the pile of books. The Emperor plunged into reading, his eyes filled with fascination. The female protagonist froze. Unlike the others, he could actually read the ancient language. She lunged forward to snatch the pages, but Cedric held the book high above her head. Ariel, furious, demanded the notebook back immediately. If Cedric dared to read 1 more word, she would turn and disappear, returning to the forest. The Emperor was stunned. She was going to leave him again. In fact, he could barely restrain himself. For 10 years, he had stared at that sealed magic circle, driven almost to despair. He had sworn that when he finally saw her, he would kill her for it. He wanted to destroy this female protagonist who didn't belong to him. But the thought of her ceasing to exist in this world tormented him, so he abandoned his original plan. Now he wanted her alive, to seize her, bring her back, lock her up, even hide her away in some secret place. As long as he could see her. Cedric sneered inwardly. This was why she shouldn't provoke him. Besides, he had endured for so long. Shouldn't she give him some reward? Ariel looked away, explaining that it was just her diary. This only made Cedric more eager, and he flipped through the pages with increased excitement. The female protagonist panicked again, ordering him to burn the notebook on the spot. The Emperor, without hesitation, immediately set the notebook alight. He was still curious about the relationship between Sheld and Akner. When he heard they were siblings, Cedric could hardly believe it. Did she really kill him? Realizing there was no romantic relationship between them, he gave a genuine smile. Akner's name had been bothering him, but now everything made sense. If they were lovers, Cedric would have personally tracked down the mage's remains and destroyed them. If he couldn't find them, he would have used black magic to resurrect Akner, just to kill him again. Now he only wanted to know one thing: why Ariel had gone to such lengths to hide her identity. When he heard the reason was her age, he burst out laughing. But he didn't understand. Shouldn't she be proud to be a legendary witch with countless achievements? Even a magic circle she left behind was still in use, still effective, still powerful. Just then, the female protagonist's expression darkened. Her greatest achievement wasn't among those listed accomplishments. 1,000 years ago, the world was devastated beyond recognition, countless lives lost, and the one who caused all this was Ariel.